Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Lizz Draws. Today I'll be doing a colored sketch of Tenn from IDOLiSH7 based on his card, You Complete Me. In this video, I'll be discussing the process behind this color sketch. I'll be telling it in a more different format, more storytelling and more of a improvised format, because I've mainly been going off a scripted basis and I kind of want to change things up. So with that being said, let's get started today's episode, shall we? We're starting to delve into more complex topics in my illustrations and art, so we're going to be in for the long haul, so I hope you won't mind. So before I start talking about the process behind this piece and how I went about doing the You Complete Me Tenn, I just wanted to say that this stream, or at least this video, it was originally based off of a Twitch archive that I did back on September 16, or September 15, around that date. I streamed this piece on Twitch, so if you'd like to see me draw more art in real time and you'd like to get a chance to talk to me, you're more than welcome to follow me on Twitch. It's Lizz Ikanaka. I also update on Twitter when I'll be streaming and more video updates, so you can follow me on Twitter as well, same thing as Twitch, Lizz Ikanaka. But anyway, when I started this illustration for You Complete Me Tenn, I started off with the flat colors. Again, like my first two episodes of Lizz Draws, I already did the sketch beforehand. It's my least favorite step, and I like figuring out my composition first, because figuring out the composition can always be so difficult sometimes. But anyway, I layered it so that I had like this white layer of basically all of Tenn, and I basically spent like the first few minutes or so just laying down my flats. I would color reference his official art, and I would just put them down wherever it seemed the most fitting. And there isn't really that much I have to say about the flats. It's just like any other process. You do it, and then you're rewarded. And I don't really have a art style that works with like having like good flats, but basically I make the flats all on separate layers, and I ended up having different layers I can work with for different base colors, and I'll be shading and rendering each part as I go throughout the piece. So this is the first time I've ever really covered a full illustration here on this channel. I say full illustration, but this was kind of, I say quote-unquote sloppy, because for this piece I just didn't do line art. I went with just the sketch, and I was like, you know what, let's do it, let's have some fun. And I just wanted to like lay down some quick colors and have fun with it. So when I got into shading the You Complete Me Tenn, I decided that, you know what, I'm just gonna do the same techniques I usually do. The transparent watercolor technique has always felt very tried and true to me. I mean, yes, there's different shading methods out there, but I decided to stick with something that I knew for this particular illustration, since I wanted to finish this colored illustration relatively quickly. So if you've watched any of my previous Lizz Draws videos, which I highly suggest you do if you'd like to learn some techniques on monochrome shading as well as other textured looks. But if you haven't watched them yet, that's okay. I'll reiterate my process a little bit here, and if you've watched those episodes already, I thank you for sticking around. But basically, when I shade, I like to lay down my shadows with the transparent watercolor brush, and I use the alpha color to erase out those shadows that I laid down and refine the shape of it. And I have a tendency to use the soothing watercolor brush as well as other blending tools in order to like make the texture feel real and make the piece feel very cohesive. So as I go through this shading process, it's honestly very soothing for me. I don't really have any frustrations while shading in particular. It's always been my favorite step of drawing. Shading is it's a really nice way for me to let loose, and I honestly adore it in every form. Whenever I pick my colors, I should probably explain color theory now, just because I haven't really done any color complex work at this point of time yet, at least on Lizz Draws. But basically, whenever it comes to selecting my colors for drawings, I like to Well, for one thing, as I state with the flats, I color reference the official art for the most part. If there's some colors that I feel are off or don't really match the color temperature I'm aiming for, I slightly modify it, but for the most part, I chose to stick with the colors provided in the reference since I felt that they were pretty spot on. But when it comes to the shadows and the highlights, I like to do a little bit of a thing we call hue shifting. So basically, hue shifting is, so you take a look at the color wheel, it's displayed on the right. To give a hypothetical example, let's say you have the color pink, like the color of Tenn's tie. I pick the shadow basically by moving the color closer to purple for shadows. Since, generally speaking with art, you kind of associate the colors purple and yellow with your shadows and highlights respectively. Of course, you can always change this as you want, but it really depends on what your light source is. If you're going for something neutral, by all means use purple and yellow. So in this scenario, I would move the pink to be closer to the purple range, so it would become slightly more, I believe it would be a little bit more magenta when you shift it. And I also changed the value of the color as well, which basically makes it darker. And as for the highlight colors, I pick those by basically doing the opposite, and instead of going toward purple, I go toward yellow. So if it was for pink, it would start having a little bit of a red to it with a little bit more brightness to it. Picking out your colors for shading, it's kind of hard to explain at first, but it's something that everyone has their own preferred method of doing. There's different ways you can combine your colors to make a really aesthetic pleasing color palette. I'll try to see if I can leave some descriptions and tutorials down in the links below. Preferably source tutorials, because I don't like reposting people's art, nor do I condone that behavior because it's very bad for artists. But if there are any color resources, I will leave them down below in the comments, the description, and you can find them there. If there is no resources in the description, then I sincerely apologize for mentioning something that doesn't exist. But anyway, I just went through with my usual shading style and how I pick colors. There wasn't really anything particularly too challenging about You Complete Me Tenn in particular, just because this Tenn he doesn't really have that much colors going on, and it's a very simple. It wasn't really that complex in compared to other things that I've worked with before. As a side note, as you're watching me shade this in time-lapse form, I just have to note that when I was working on this, on the Twitch stream, you're not going to find it here because I cut it out, but if you go back into the Twitch stream archive and look at my highlights, I actually messed around for a fair bit while working on this piece. I ended up editing dog ears onto Tenn. I believe I uploaded a meme version onto Twitter of this a while back, but it was a lot of fun. So even though I already said this in the beginning, you're more than welcome to check me out on Twitch. It's a lot of fun hanging out with everyone, talking about ideas, art, creative process, bonding over that kind of stuff, or just talking about fandoms and franchises, because I do have a fair bit of people that like Xenoblade, and I used to be in the Xenoblade fandom. I don't really play it that much anymore, nor do I really talk about it that much, but it's always fun to revisit an old topic of mine, because I know that Xenoblade is something I really cherish close to my heart. But anyway, I'm getting a little bit distracted from this. So once I finished shading Tenn, it was time for me to work on the background. For the background, I have this little scenery where he's basically standing on the balcony as if he's showing you the cityscape. And in order to make this balcony a reality, or basically the whole background really, I had this 3D perspective grid set up by GlitchxCity Paint. It's a really convenient feature. As far as I'm aware, not that much programs I know of have it. There is Procreate, Adobe Illustrator, and GlitchxCity Paint that does have this perspective ruler. Having perspective rulers can help a lot, because basically what you do with the perspective ruler is you set up your perspective grid basically to determine where are your vanishing points. For my piece, here I have 3 vanishing points, and they all, which is the X, Y, and Z axis, and this allowed my cityscape to have this bit of 3-dimensionality to it, and by doing that, I was able to set up the buildings apart and like plan them out and figure it out. Without the perspective grid, yes, you can make backgrounds, but it's a lot more easier and convenient to work with a perspective grid since you'll be able to get things more correctly aligned. Now, with that being said, I had the city outlines done, so I basically went in and I wanted to shade the city, so I had this dark gray, and then I added a darker gray shadow onto it, and to have the imitation of the city nightlights, I basically just went for orange windows. I could have gone for yellow, but I felt that would be too basic, and I wanted the piece to have a little bit of a warm feeling to it, so I ended up using orange instead, and I'm really happy with how that turned out. I believe I used a soft airbrush to do this. You can just look at the right on the sidebar to see what tool and specifics I was using. I'm not entirely sure. It's been maybe 2 weeks since I've last worked on this piece, and I'm so happy with how this piece turned out. It's like the only completed artwork I did in September that was like fully colored to this extent. But anyway, the city was a lot of fun to do. It does get kind of tedious doing all that window work, but that's to be expected with any drawing. You have to deal with what the drawing gives at you. Sometimes drawings can just be really time consuming, but if you want your drawing to be a good product, you have to make sure you pay attention to detail and try your best not to half-ass it, because I know it's very tempting to half-ass things sometimes, but if you're in the state of mind where it's like, okay, I can half-ass this is just for practice, then by all means, go for it. I'm not stopping you. But if you're going for something that's more detail-oriented, make sure that you're preferably in the best mindset and don't force yourself to stick through all the grindy work, though you'll have to do it eventually, so make sure that you put your best into it, but also don't get too perfectionistic about it, because sometimes little make pieces take a lot more longer than intended. With the city done, I ended up coloring the sky, and I wanted to go with something really vibrant, so whenever it comes to night skies, which is honestly my favorite aesthetic, if you've watched the second Lizz Draws episode, which was the winter Tenn, you kind of might have figured out that I really like night sky aesthetics. Or if you followed me on Twitter, you'll see that a lot of my artworks opt for a night background, and it's because night skies have this really nice serene beauty to it that's really calming. I like to use a combination of blues, purples, and a little bit of pink just to make the colors in the sky look more visually appealing. While it might not be dark like realistic skies, whenever it comes to anime styled artworks, at least for me, I like to pick colors that look appealing to the viewer and not just rely on realism, because while my pieces I feel do have something that adhere to realism, I just like to focus on making the piece vibrantly pop out. Something that I have to say to anyone that's doing art, don't make yourself feel restricted to any style or anything, really. Find out what works for you. What do you like about each style? My favorite part of anime style, honestly, is just how vibrant the colors turn out, and I just really like how they incorporate colors and how there's a lot of diversity in that style, and I guess coloring is my favorite part of the anime style. I mean, or more like coloring in general is just my favorite step in art. I just really like seeing the colors and mixing them together, and while that might not be everyone's strength, that's fine, because everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. It's fine. But whenever it came to the night sky, as I said, blue, purple, and pink, and I used the soft airbrush blend as necessary. And for the sky, I added a tinge of sparkle to it and stars with the airbrush's spray option. And let me just say, even though it's not an intended star brush, sometimes you'll find that the best texture brushes or the effect brushes are the ones that aren't intended to serve that purpose. Just because it might not be labeled star, so to say, does not mean it can be used for a star, because just play around with your brushes and you'll see what effects you like the most about them. It takes time to get yourself familiarized with your brush set, but once you get yourself familiarized with the brush set as well as other assets available, you're set to go. With the sky done, or rather with the gradient of the sky done and the stars, I added the moon as well. This is a scenario in which creating the shape of the moon was easier by making the circle, by laying down like this yellow airbrush and then erasing part of it, because I don't know about you, but there are some things that I just don't want to like make it raw and do it from scratch. Like making a crescent shape is not something I would do on my own willingly. So I just made the circle, because when you overlap two circles together, you'll see that there's like a point in which the point where they don't intersect is shaped like a crescent. So if you can see that negative space and how the erasing a shape can make a shape look a certain way, then by all means go for it. Take your shortcuts or do things that work out the most for you. After I had the background and Tenn done, this is where I started editing. This is the part where I added secondary adjustments. I went back to using the usual tone curve and the usual gradient map. I wanted to make the piece feel a little bit more, I don't know, a kind of like romantic. So I added this little pink soft gradient map as well in order to like accentuate the mood of the piece. And the gradient maps, basically, if you don't know how they work, they basically assign colors based off of the value and density of the colors below it. So if you had something like, let's say you had a black and white gradient, that's the gradient that you had, it'll assign the colors according to the value / brightness stat. You can use this in several ways. I think I put a soft light layer, I think, but the settings of the blending mode and the gradient map I used would be displayed right now because I can't remember it at the top of my head. Additionally, I also added a tone curve to make the shadows more prominent, since having the shadows more prominent would bring out the definition of the piece. And once I've made those adjustments, I think I also did a little bit of some other layer adjustments too by having like oranges and pinks, but I just like adding secondary effects to make sure everything feels like it's one cohesive piece. And once you have like your additional layers on, it'll let you have a piece that just feels cohesive. And honestly, that's all there is to it. That's all I have to say about You Complete Me Tenn. I had a lot of fun working on You Complete Me Tenn as a piece, and I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble about it as well. I decided to take this different approach since I didn't feel like a scripted approach would be best, and I wanted to try to make something a little bit more natural so that I could feel more accessible and not just me giving my knowledge. Though if you'd like for me to go back to the other format, you're more than welcome to tell me to do so. But anyway, if you'd like to support the piece, feel free to like and retweet it on Twitter. It's linked below in the description. I had a lot of fun working on You Complete Me Tenn. It's been a while since I've done something of this scale and color because I don't know, I've just been really distracted by doodling. But feel free to discuss your own experiences of cityscapes, colored illustrations, or anything about art in general. I'm more than happy to hear about what you have to say. If you have any clarification, advice, or anything, you can leave it. And if you enjoyed watching this video, consider clicking the like button and subscribing for more art videos on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll be covering both simple and complex illustration and pieces in the future. I'll also try to upload more diverse video topics in the future. I'm thinking of uploading a discussion video this Tuesday, so keep your eyes peeled for this Tuesday. I might just end up dropping a discussion video about my experiences with Sketchtember and transitioning to Inktober. But anyway, with that being said, thanks for watching today's episode of Lizz Draws. I hope to see you all next one. Later!